within the heart of a dense, foreboding forest stood a motel that had long been abandoned by the passage of time. Its once vibrant sign had faded to an eerie shade of gray, and the windows were cloaked in layers of dust and cobwebs. The air surrounding the motel was thick with a sense of unease, as if the very trees whispered stories of its grim history. Travelers who dared to venture into these woods often found themselves drawn to the motel, as if an invisible force compelled them to step inside. The few who managed to break free of that pull would later recall feelings of dread that had settled in the pit of their stomachs. The motel, it seemed, had a sinister reputation that was well earned. Among the guests who had been unfortunate enough to check in was a woman named Emma. She had been driving for hours on a lonely road, the forest's gloom casting an unsettling pall over her journey. As the sun dipped below the horizon, her headlights illuminated the motel's faded sign. Weary and desperate for rest, she hesitantly turned into the gravel parking lot. The lobby was dimly lit, with flickering lights casting eerie shadows across the cracked linoleum floor. An old man behind the counter greeted Emma with a toothy grin that never reached his eyes. He handed her a tarnished key and muttered something about room 13. Emma's heart sank, but fatigue pushed her reservations aside. Upon entering the room, a cold breeze sent a shiver down her spine. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, and the wallpaper peeled away from the walls like the skin of a dying animal. She pulled the thin blanket over her and tried to ignore the sensation that she was being watched. As the night deepened, Emma's sleep was punctuated by strange sounds, footsteps echoing in empty hallways, whispered conversations that seemed to come from the walls themselves. When she dared to peek out from beneath the covers, she glimpsed fleeting shadows that vanished as soon as her eyes landed on them. The next morning, Emma made her way to the lobby, her unease growing with every step. To her shock, the old man at the counter was the same as the night before, wearing the same vacant smile. She demanded to check out, but the man simply handed her back the same key, insisting she hadn't paid yet. Days turned into weeks as Emma's attempts to leave became increasingly desperate. Each night, she heard the whispers and saw the shadows, and each morning, she found herself back in the same room, trapped in a never-ending loop. She discovered that other guests suffered the same fate, their faces etched with a mix of terror and resignation. Determined to break free, Emma began to search for answers. In a hidden corner of the motel's library, she found a dusty old journal that detailed the motel's dark history. It spoke of a curse placed upon the property by vengeful spirits wronged by the motel's owner in decades past. The curse bound souls to the motel, ensuring they could never leave, their torment feeding the spirits' thirst for revenge. With newfound resolve, Emma delved deeper into the journal's pages, seeking a way to break the curse. She uncovered a ritual that required her to gather objects linked to the spirit's past and perform a ceremony in the heart of the motel. Guided by the journal's instructions, she navigated the shifting hallways, evaded the shadows, and gathered the necessary items. As the moon hung high in the sky, Emma stood in the motel's lobby, surrounded by the collected artifacts. With each word of the ritual she chanted, the air grew thicker, charged with an otherworldly energy. The shadows converged, swirling around her in a maelstrom of darkness, their anger palpable. Just as it seemed that the ritual would fail, a blinding light erupted from the artifacts, repelling the shadows. The ground shook, and the very walls of the motel seemed to groan in protest. As the light faded, so did the curse's grip on Emma. The sun rose on a motel that no longer felt haunted by its grim past. The air was clear, the shadows banished, and Emma stood in the doorway, free at last. The once forgotten motel was now a place of salvation, a beacon for lost souls seeking refuge. But Emma knew the truth. The curse had been broken, but the scars of that endless night remained. And as she looked back one last time at the motel, she couldn't help but wonder if the spirits had truly been vanquished or if their whispers still lingered, waiting for the next traveler to heed their call. In a forgotten corner of the country, nestled between a sprawling forest and a winding river, stood a dilapidated motel with a sinister reputation. It was known far and wide as the Vanishing Inn, but locals simply referred to it as the Cursed Motel. The source of its infamy was none other than Room 13. Legends spoke of guests who had checked into room 13 and never checked out. Whispers in the wind claimed that those who dared to spend a night within its walls were doomed to disappear, their fates sealed within the room's confines. The stories had grown so dark and disturbing that even the most adventurous souls would think twice before entering that cursed room. One stormy night, a renowned paranormal investigator named Amelia arrived at the motel. Armed with an array of gadgets designed to capture the supernatural, she had made a name for herself by debunking myths and exposing hoaxes. However, room 13 intrigued her like no other case before. She was determined to uncover the truth behind the legends. Amelia checked into the motel under an assumed name, hiding her true identity to avoid any preconceived notions from the staff. As she settled into her room, she could feel an inexplicable chill in the air. The room was oddly pristine, contrasting sharply with the motel's rundown exterior. The carpet was immaculate, and the sheets were tightly tucked in. As the night deepened, Amelia set up her equipment, recording devices strategically placed around the room. She sat in the dim light, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Hours passed, and the silence was suffocating. Just as doubt began to creep into her mind, a soft rustling sound echoed from the corner of the room. Amelia's heart raced as she aimed her camera towards the source of the sound. The shadows seemed to dance and twist, forming shapes that defied explanation. Suddenly, a figure materialized, an ethereal silhouette that seemed both human and otherworldly. It stood in the center of the room, its form constantly shifting. Trepidation turned into terror as the figure approached Amelia. It spoke in whispers that crawled up her spine, recounting tales of pain and anguish. Amelia's gadgets went haywire, emitting static and distorted voices. Panic surged through her veins as she realized that the room was not just haunted, it was a gateway to another dimension. Amelia's attempts to escape were in vain. The walls shifted, the door led to nowhere, and the room itself seemed to expand and contract like a living creature. She was trapped, at the mercy of the entity that haunted room 13. Days turned into nights as she struggled to maintain her sanity, her fear intensifying with each passing moment. In her darkest hour, Amelia discovered an old journal hidden beneath the floorboards. Its pages were filled with the desperate scribbles of previous occupants, their entries detailing their torment and despair. They had all tried to escape, just as she had, and had failed. Driven by desperation, Amelia began to decipher the journal's cryptic entries. It spoke of a ritual, a way to appease the entity and find a way back to the mortal realm. With nothing left to lose, she followed the instructions, performing the ritual as the room pulsated with malevolent energy. As the last incantation left her lips, the room seemed to shudder and shake. The walls cracked, and a blinding light enveloped everything. When the light subsided, Amelia found herself outside the motel, room 13 standing ominously behind her. Exhausted but alive, she realized that she had escaped the room's grasp. The curse had been broken, and the entity had been appeased. But the scars of her ordeal remained, a constant reminder of the horrors she had witnessed. Amelia left the motel, vowing never to return. The vanishing inn stood as a haunting reminder of the supernatural forces that linger just beyond our understanding. And room 13, though now dormant, continued to whisper its secrets to those who dared to listen. In the heart of a desolate landscape, where the road stretched out like an endless ribbon through the darkness, there lay an abandoned highway motel known only as the Haunting Highway Inn. It was a place that had long been forgotten, shrouded in mystery and eerie tales. Most travelers dared not venture near, for the stories that circulated about the motel spoke of something much more sinister than rusting signage and peeling paint. One moonless night, during a torrential downpour that seemed to drown the world in a shroud of obscurity, a small group of travelers found themselves lost and desperate for shelter. Their GPS had led them astray, and they had no choice but to take a chance on the flickering neon sign that read the Haunting Highway Inn. With their car sputtering, they pulled into the motel's cracked parking lot, the sound of raindrops drumming on the roof echoing their anxiety. The lobby, dimly lit and smelling of decay, greeted them with an unsettling stillness. An old man behind the counter, his features barely visible in the dim light, offered them a room without a word, handing over a single, tarnished key. Unease settled over the group as they navigated through hallways that seemed to stretch out impossibly long, the flickering fluorescent lights casting eerie shadows on the peeling wallpaper. They arrived at room 13, and the door creaked open with a heavy sigh, as if reluctant to reveal the secrets it held within. Inside, the air was damp and chilly, despite the heat outside. The wallpaper was torn and faded, revealing glimpses of a time long past. The travelers exchanged uneasy glances, but exhaustion pushed them to settle in for the night, convincing themselves that the tales of the motel were nothing more than urban legends. As the night deepened, strange sounds echoed through the corridors, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere, and fleeting shadows that danced just out of sight. Sleep was elusive, and as the hours stretched on, the travelers began to sense a presence in the room, a malevolent force that watched and waited. When one of them ventured to the bathroom, they glimpsed a reflection that was not their own in the mirror, a pale, hollow-eyed figure standing behind them. Their scream tore through the silence, alerting the others. Panic spread as they realized the room's layout had shifted, the hallway outside appearing different than it had when they entered. The night became a blur of terror and confusion, as the travelers found themselves trapped in a maze of shifting corridors, each turn leading to a different era, a different version of the motel's disturbing history. Time seemed to warp and blend, and the spirits of those who had met their end within those walls whispered their tales of anguish. Desperation consumed them as they fought to find their way back to the room that had become the nexus of their nightmares, room 13. It was there that they discovered a yellow journal hidden beneath a floorboard, chronicling the motel's grim history of dark rituals and lost souls. As dawn approached, they made one final attempt to escape the ever-changing maze. Guided by the journal's cryptic instructions, they navigated the shifting halls, encountering vengeful apparitions and reliving the motel's tragic past along the way. Exhausted and battered, they reached room 13 just as the first rays of sunlight pierced the horizon. With the journal's guidance, they performed a ritual to appease the restless spirits and break the cycle of haunting. The ground shook, walls trembled, and the echoes of anguished wails filled the air as the motel seemed to rebel against their efforts. But in a burst of blinding light, the travelers found themselves standing outside the now dilapidated building, the curse finally lifted. The group left the haunting highway inn, forever scarred by their harrowing experience. As they drove away, they cast a final glance at the motel in their rearview mirror, wondering if it had all been a dream. But the haunted tales of the haunting highway inn would live on, a chilling reminder that some places are best left untouched, their mysteries forever entwined with the darkest corners of the human imagination.